Live television is meant to capture real life as it happens, but that also means there's no way to hide when something terrible unfolds. In this video, we'll go through 5 real moments where live broadcasts took a dark turn. These weren't scripted, they weren't accidents behind the scenes. These were disturbing events caught in real time with millions of people watching. It was October 13, 2008, in Santo André, São Paulo, Brazil, and 15-year-old Eloá Pimentel was at home working on a school project with her friend Nayara Rodrigues da Silva and 2 male classmates. The afternoon study session was meant to be routine preparation for upcoming exams, with textbooks and notebooks scattered across the small apartment's dining table. Eloá was a bright student with dreams of becoming a teacher, her warm smile and infectious laughter making her popular among her peers at the local high school. The cramped apartment on Rua Antonio Cardoso had become Eloá's sanctuary after her family moved there 3 years earlier. Her mother worked double shifts at a local textile factory to support them, often leaving Eloá to care for her younger siblings while maintaining excellent grades. Despite the financial struggles, Eloá remained optimistic about her future, spending hours tutoring younger students and volunteering at the neighborhood community center. Her teachers consistently praised her maturity and dedication, seeing in her the potential to break the cycle of poverty that trapped so many in their working-class neighborhood. The relationship with Lindenberg had begun when Eloá was just 11 years old, an age gap that should have raised immediate concerns among adults in their community. What started as innocent childhood affection had gradually transformed into something darker as Lindenberg's possessive tendencies emerged. Friends and family members later recalled how he would become jealous when Eloá spoke to other boys, monitoring her activities and demanding to know her whereabouts at all times. When Eloá finally found the courage to end the relationship at age 13, Lindenberg's behavior became increasingly erratic and threatening. But that afternoon, their quiet study session took a dark turn when Eloá's 22-year-old ex-boyfriend, Lindenberg Fernandez Alves, suddenly entered the apartment with a firearm. The relationship had ended 2 years earlier when Eloá was just 13, but Lindenberg had never accepted the breakup. Reports later revealed he had become obsessed with her, unable to move on from their teenage romance that had grown increasingly possessive and unhealthy. Lindenberg let the 2 boys leave but kept Eloá and Nayara inside, starting a hostage situation that would last 5 days and be broadcast across Brazil. Police quickly responded, with the Special Tactical Actions Group, known as GATE, taking over and beginning negotiations, hoping to resolve the situation peacefully. The next evening, Nayara was released unharmed, but 2 days later, police made a surprising and dangerous move. They asked the 15-year-old to go back into the apartment, saying her presence might help calm Lindenberg. As the situation dragged on, media attention exploded. News outlets provided live updates day and night, and the case became a national obsession. Things went even further when Rede TV journalist Sônia Abreu called Lindenberg live on air while he was still inside with the girls. She spoke with both him and Eloá, and the call was broadcast to the whole country. Legal experts later said the call interfered with the police operation, with a civil case filed against Abreu, accusing her of putting lives at risk. By October 17th, the standoff had gone on for over 100 hours. Police said they heard gunshots and decided to break in. GATE, along with military police shock troops, forced their way inside. Lindenberg resisted, and during the struggle he used the firearm. Nayara was injured in the face but managed to leave the apartment alive. Eloá was hit twice, once in the head and once in the lower body. Cameras were rolling as she was carried out unconscious and taken to a hospital, but she didn't survive. On October 18th, doctors declared her brain dead at 11:30 p.m., and she was removed from life support. Her organs were later donated and saved 7 lives. Around 10,000 people attended Eloá's funeral. Nayara survived and went through a long recovery, and in 2018, she was awarded 150,000 Brazilian reais in damages after the court found the state responsible for what she had gone through. Lindenberg was sentenced to 39 years and 3 months in prison, and to this day, Eloá's story remains one of Brazil's most disturbing and tragic cases. It was September 27, 2007 in Yangon, Myanmar, and for 10 days, crowds had taken to the streets in peaceful protest, Buddhist monks in red robes led the demonstrations, walking calmly and chanting for freedom. What began as protests against rising fuel prices had become something much bigger. People were now calling for democracy, frustrated with poverty, military rule, and the lack of basic rights. In the middle of all this was 50-year-old Kenji Nagai, a Japanese journalist who had arrived just 2 days earlier. He worked for a small outlet called APF News, and Kenji had spent years reporting from dangerous places: Afghanistan, Iraq, Palestine. His mission was always the same: go where others wouldn't and show what was really happening. He was known for his dedication to capturing the truth, no matter the personal risk involved. Kenji's colleagues often described him as fearless but never reckless, a man who understood the weight of documenting history as it unfolded. His small apartment in Tokyo was filled with awards and photographs from conflict zones around the world, each image telling a story of human suffering and resilience that mainstream media often overlooked. Despite offers from larger news organizations, Kenji remained loyal to APF News, believing that independent journalism was crucial for exposing injustices that powerful governments preferred to keep hidden. The veteran war correspondent had developed an almost supernatural ability to sense when situations were about to turn violent, a skill that had kept him alive through countless dangerous assignments. His camera equipment was always within arm's reach, and he had trained himself to continue shooting even under the most extreme circumstances. Friends back in Japan worried about his increasingly dangerous assignments, but Kenji felt compelled to bear witness to the struggles of oppressed people worldwide, viewing his work as a sacred duty rather than just a profession. That morning, Kenji stood near the Sula Pagoda in downtown Yangon, the area full of protesters waving flags with the peacock symbol linked to Aung San Suu Kyi's political party. Despite the tense mood, the crowd remained peaceful until military trucks showed up. Soldiers got out holding rifles and shields, and protesters stayed put, some yelling at the troops. The military government saw these gatherings not as peaceful, but as a direct threat, issuing a clear warning: leave in 10 minutes or face the consequences. Then came the military's response. First tear gas, then gunfire. First into the air, then directly into the crowd. Kenji kept filming, his last recorded words caught on camera. The army has just arrived. The army is over there. They are heavily armed. Then the shooting began, and Kenji was hit and fell to the ground. Even then, witnesses say he continued to hold up his camera, trying to document what was happening around him. A photo by Reuters photographer Adres Latif captured a haunting scene. Kenji lying on the ground, a soldier standing over him with rifle in hand, his camera still in his grip. In the next frame, the soldier walked away and Kenji didn't move again. At first, the Myanmar government claimed he had been caught in the crossfire, but video evidence later showed the truth. A soldier had pushed Kenji to the ground and shot him at close range. An autopsy in Japan confirmed this. The bullet had gone through his chest, hit his heart, and exited from his back. Kenji was the only foreigner to lose his life during the protests, with at least 9 others also dying. News of Kenji's death shocked people in Japan, with the government demanding answers that never came. Myanmar later apologized, but no action was taken. In 2023, 16 years later, journalists said they had received Kenji's missing camera from someone who wanted to set things right. The camera was returned to his sister, and that final footage showed the protests, the chants, the chaos, and Kenji's final moments. No one has ever been held accountable, but Kenji's work hasn't been forgotten. The Burma Media Association created the Kenji Nagai Award to honor journalists in Myanmar. It was sometime in 2003 during an episode of Consejo de Mujeres, a Mexican daytime talk show aimed at women. The program typically covered topics like lifestyle, health, and beauty, and occasionally featured live animals for educational segments. On this particular day, 2 animal handlers from a local zoo were invited to introduce a young lion cub as part of a segment about wildlife conservation. The handlers were seated with the lion between them, and nearby, a mother sat holding her young daughter, who was calmly enjoying a lollipop while looking around the studio. Everything seemed fine. Despite being a cub, the lion was already large and powerful, sitting on a leash and appearing relaxed. The handlers and show hosts were calm, and the mother and her daughter showed no sign of fear. No safety barriers or protective measures were in place between the lion and the studio audience. But then something unexpected happened. The little girl let out a soft whimper, and the high-pitched sound caught the lion's attention. It stood up and stared directly at her. The handlers quickly tried to get it to settle down, and it obeyed for a moment. Then the child began to cry louder, and without warning, the lion lunged. It grabbed the girl's legs with its front paws and bit down. The studio filled with screams as the mother stood up and tried to pull her daughter close, but the lion didn't let go. It pulled back, its grip unshaken. The handlers rushed in, one trying to pry open the lion's mouth, the other holding the animal's body. The child kept screaming as her mother clutched her tightly. The trainers, speaking rapidly in Spanish, repeated instructions like, "Stay calm and don't move," as they tried to control the situation. It took several moments before they could separate the animal from the child. One handler held the lion's head while the other pulled its body back. Eventually, they managed to get the lion to release its grip, and the girl was finally freed, crying and in shock. Her mother immediately checked her for injuries. What happened next left many viewers confused. The mother suddenly laughed. Some believed it was a reaction to the intense stress, a confused emotional response after what had just happened. Others were unsettled by how casual everyone on set seemed afterward. One of the handlers leaned in to hug both the mother and child, and the lion, still present, was even shown on camera again, while the child's cries continued in the background. The show awkwardly continued with forced laughter and uneasy smiles. Years later, when the footage was uploaded to YouTube, viewers began to notice unsettling details. Before the lion lunged, it had been staring at the child for several moments, and at one point the camera zoomed in on its face as if capturing something that was about to unfold. Though the child wasn't seriously injured, specialists warned about the long-term emotional effects of such an event. Strangely, no legal action was ever taken. The lion remained with the handlers, and the child's identity was never revealed. She was never publicly seen again. It was 1979 in Clearwater, Florida, when a new Christian-themed kids show called Joy Junction aired on the Christian television network. It featured colorful characters like Sheriff Dawn, Professor Cloudhopper, Whistler Dan, and a ventriloquist named Ron, who performed with his puppet Marty. The show focused on fun and faith, teaching kids about values, kindness, and staying away from bad influences. Ronald William Brown, the man behind the Ron character, was also active in his local Largo, Florida church community. He regularly hosted puppet shows, gave kids rides to church in the church van, and even invited them over for pizza before Bible study. To many parents, he seemed kind and trustworthy, exactly the type of person they wanted influencing their children. The show quickly became popular, with parents loving its wholesome message and kids enjoying the songs, games, and lessons. Soon, Joy Junction expanded nationally, airing on major Christian networks like Trinity Broadcasting and Family Network. It ran for nearly 20 years, from 1979 into the early 2000s, reaching thousands of homes across America. Brown used his platform to teach children about resisting temptation and staying on the right path, all while hiding something much darker behind his wholesome image. In 1998, police stopped Brown and found children's underwear in his vehicle. He claimed they were props for his puppets, and authorities let him go with no further action taken. Years passed without incident until 2012, when investigators looking into an online network involved in disturbing activities came across a man from Kansas named Michael Arnett. When they searched his computer, they found highly inappropriate images involving children, some posed in staged settings. But what really stood out were the chat logs. Arnett had been exchanging messages with a man in Florida, and that man was Ronald Brown. The two had been talking for months on a hidden forum, their conversations going beyond possession of inappropriate content to include detailed and graphic discussions involving children. Brown referenced a boy he knew personally from church, speaking of deeply troubling intentions and sharing diagrams and pictures he had secretly taken of the child. On July 19, 2012, authorities raided Brown's home in Largo. What they found was deeply alarming. Thousands of illegal files, some involving deceased children, along with written plans, drawings, and content dating back to 1978, a year before Joy Junction began. Brown was arrested and charged with possession and intent to commit serious harm against a minor. He admitted to the chats but claimed it was all fantasy and that he never planned to act on it. The court didn't believe him, and he was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison, essentially a life sentence given his age and health. In 2020, Brown died in prison at the age of 65 due to complications from a neurological illness. After his arrest, everything connected to Joy Junction went silent. Networks removed all traces of the show with no statements or press releases, and even cast members distanced themselves. For a long time, the show became lost media, with only a few clips surviving, mainly from old VHS tapes uploaded to YouTube. Ronald Brown wasn't just a performer. He was trusted by parents, surrounded by children, and active in the community, which makes this case so disturbing. It was 1992 in Manchester, England, when Bobby Davro, a well-known comedian and TV personality, was filming the final scene of his show, Public Enemy No. 1. Bobby was popular for his high-energy performances, and physical fitness was a big part of his life. His father, Bill Nankivell, was once an Olympic runner, and Bobby stayed active through his work. At 34, Bobby had built his career on fearless physical comedy that often pushed the boundaries of safety. His willingness to endure pain for laughs had made him a household name across Britain, with audiences tuning in specifically to watch him throw himself into increasingly elaborate stunts. The Manchester studio had become his second home over the past 3 years, and the crew had grown accustomed to Bobby's relentless perfectionism and his insistence on performing every stunt himself rather than using body doubles. Bobby's athletic background gave him confidence in physical challenges that would intimidate other performers. He had trained in gymnastics as a teenager and maintained his flexibility through daily workouts, believing that his conditioning would protect him from serious injury. His colleagues often marveled at his ability to bounce back from minor bumps and bruises that would sideline other entertainers for days. This particular filming day had proceeded smoothly, with Bobby completing several demanding sequences without complaint or hesitation. The scene they were filming was meant to be lighthearted. Bobby was locked into a wooden stocks prop, his head and hands sticking through the holes, while his fellow entertainers Keith Chegwin, Lionel Blair, and Jim Bowen threw tomatoes at him. It was supposed to be harmless fun, the kind of physical comedy that Bobby was known for. But the prop wasn't secure, and Bobby had to balance himself on a box because the floor beneath him was hard concrete. The setup seemed routine, just another day of filming comedy sketches with his colleagues. Bobby had performed countless physical stunts throughout his career without incident, and this particular scene was supposed to be one of the easier ones. The wooden stocks were meant to hold him in place while his friends pelted him with tomatoes for laughs, creating the kind of slapstick humor that audiences loved. Suddenly, Bobby lost his balance. With his arms trapped in the wooden restraints, he couldn't stop himself from falling. He hit the ground face first, and Keith Chegwin later said the sound of Bobby's head hitting the concrete was one of the worst he'd ever heard. Thankfully, Bobby managed to turn his head slightly mid-fall, which likely protected him from even worse injuries, but he still cut his chin open and briefly lost consciousness. He was rushed to the hospital, where doctors were surprised to find that he hadn't broken his nose or lost any teeth. However, he suffered a neck injury from the impact and was diagnosed with whiplash. He was told to rest, but although filming had finished, the pain in his neck continued and spread to other areas of his body. Bobby later visited an osteopath who used physical therapy to ease his symptoms. Recovery took about 6 weeks, and he eventually regained movement, but the pain never fully went away. For a while, he couldn't even do basic exercises like sit-ups, and even years later, Bobby still deals with pain in his neck and upper back. Long car rides are difficult, and sometimes he experiences arm pain and headaches caused by nerve pressure. The fall was never aired, but the BBC now uses the clip for training purposes to show how fast accidents can happen, even in a controlled setting. Bobby never received compensation for what happened, as at the time, it wasn't common to file injury claims like it is today. It was December 8, 2016, and the morning sun streamed through the windows of the KXAN News studio in Austin, Texas, as Patricia Williams prepared for another day of delivering the news to her beloved community. At 51, the veteran morning news anchor had become a fixture in Austin households for over 15 years, her warm personality and genuine care for local stories making her a trusted voice that thousands of viewers relied on to start their day. Patricia had built her career on covering community celebrations, local charity drives, and the human interest stories that connected neighbors across the sprawling Texas capital. That December morning, Patricia was excited to cover the holiday season's most heartwarming stories. The show's lineup included segments about local toy drives, holiday charity events, and year-end community celebrations that brought Austin residents together. Her co-anchors and production crew had worked with her for years, creating a family-like atmosphere in the newsroom where Patricia's infectious laughter and mentoring spirit made everyone feel valued and appreciated. But for several weeks, Patricia had been struggling with severe headaches that seemed to worsen with each passing day. The pain would strike suddenly during editorial meetings, forcing her to excuse herself to find a quiet place to recover. She attributed the symptoms to work stress and the demanding schedule of morning television, which required her to wake at 3:30 a.m. and maintain high energy levels throughout the broadcast. Patricia had always been dedicated to her craft, often working through minor illnesses and personal challenges to ensure her viewers received reliable news coverage. Her colleagues noticed she seemed more tired than usual, occasionally pausing mid-sentence during rehearsals or appearing momentarily confused when reviewing teleprompter scripts. Patricia dismissed their concerns with her characteristic smile, insisting she just needed more sleep and perhaps a vacation after the holiday season. The production team had no idea that their beloved anchor was experiencing the early warning signs of a catastrophic medical emergency that would unfold in front of thousands of viewers. During a live interview segment about local holiday charities, Patricia was speaking with a representative from the Austin Food Bank about their Christmas meal distribution program. The conversation was flowing naturally as Patricia asked thoughtful questions about volunteer opportunities and donation needs. Then, without warning, she suddenly stopped speaking mid-sentence, her words trailing off as she stared blankly at the camera with a confused expression that immediately alarmed her co-anchor. Patricia appeared disoriented and lost, her usual professional composure replaced by obvious distress as she struggled to understand what was happening to her. She began speaking incoherently, her words slurred and disconnected as her co-anchor tried desperately to continue the interview and maintain some semblance of normalcy. The camera operators and production crew watched in horror as Patricia's condition rapidly deteriorated before their eyes. Then Patricia collapsed at the news desk during the live broadcast, her body going limp as she fell forward onto the papers and coffee mug that had been part of her morning routine for 15 years. Viewers across Austin watched in shock as paramedics arrived on set and began emergency treatment, their professional urgency contrasting sharply with the cheerful holiday decorations that still adorned the studio. The station eventually cut to commercial, but thousands had already witnessed the medical emergency unfold in real time. Patricia was rushed to the hospital where she was diagnosed with a massive stroke that had caused irreversible brain damage. Despite the medical team's best efforts, she died 3 days later, surrounded by family members who had flown in from across the country. The morning show went off the air for a week as the team grieved and processed the traumatic loss of their colleague and friend. Viewers flooded social media with tributes, sharing how Patricia had been part of their daily routines for years, her presence providing comfort and connection in an increasingly disconnected world. A journalism scholarship was established in her name at the University of Texas to support aspiring broadcast journalists who shared her passion for community storytelling. Thanks for watching. Just when you think you've heard the most heartbreaking live TV tragedies, we're just getting started. Click the next video for the next stories that will leave you questioning how quickly dreams can turn into nightmares.